Well, good morning and welcome to Tip Off. I don't have my whole drum roll. I don't have all my other stuff because this is kind of a really specific tip off report today. Recorded at 11:45 in the morning instead of 6:20 in the morning because I didn't feel comfortable this morning sitting down and recording something on the number one issue confronting the Jazz right now, which is the idea of them trading the 27, depending on your math, 25, 28% chance of getting the eighth pick to the Warriors. That's going to be the focus of this tip off. I've got thoughts on the BYU Utah rivalry, and I've got some thoughts on the Spurs and that, but I don't know if we'll get to it. I've watched Kendall Marshall. So I think we're just going to exclusively do that. If you don't care about this, then go somewhere else. All right, here's the situation, and let me make sure everyone's got this in complete understanding. The Jazz draft pick, the Warriors draft pick, the Jazz have the rights to it if it becomes the eighth pick of this draft. On Wednesday, we will have the draft lottery tomorrow. And there is about a 28%. There's some other angles where you can talk about if the Warriors jump up, then it goes down to 20. But it's about a 28% chance that the teams below the Warriors in the draft, the Warriors are currently sitting at 7, jump up ahead of the Warriors, slipping the Warriors back to 8, and then the Jazz would get the 8th pick of the draft. Now, what the Warriors want is the Warriors want to make a deal with the Jazz, and the Warriors have initiated this from all of the understandings I have. The Warriors want to get security from the Jazz that the Jazz will give them that 25, that if it goes to 8, it's still the Warrior pick in exchange for something. This is unprecedented in the NBA. I can't find any example of this happening before. And I really wasn't comfortable just coming with my own thoughts on it. I wanted to talk to some of the brighter minds of the NBA, frankly, just some bright minds about trying to get some people I really think are smart to give me some analysis on this. And in any trade and in any circumstance, this is a risk-reward conversation that the Jazz have to make a decision on. It's not like John Hollinger. You PERs and you plug them in and you figure out how it fits and whether it wins or losses and put it in the trade machine. It's somewhat unheard of to have this discussion. So the idea here is that the Jazz would guarantee the Warriors their pick, bypassing the 25% between now and the lottery, in exchange for question mark. So let's try the risk for the Jazz. And this is important. The risk is that 28% chance kicks in, and they could have had the 8th pick of the draft, and they don't get it this year. Remember, the pick next year is protected from what I'm hearing is top 6. I know in a lot of publications, and I've even said this because I've copied other people, but I'm being told top 6. It's not like they lose the pick. If the Jazz bypasses, they still get the pick next year or the year after. So the first risk is that you bypass the 25% and you give up the 8th pick. Let me just take a second on the 8th pick of the draft. It's not a franchise changer. Okay? I know this time of year we fall in love with these names and these players, and whether it's Weber State's Damian Lillard or Kendall Marshall. I watched Kendall Marshall. I'm not overwhelmed and impressed. He's certainly not a franchise changer, but he's also probably projected around 14. I mean, Perry Jones, Terrence Jones, Jeremy Lamb, John Henson, Jared Sullinger, Harrison Barnes. These aren't franchise-changing players. In fact, if you look over the last 10 years at the 8th pick of the draft, Rudy Gay is a starter, and the rest of them aren't. Okay, so Al-Farouq Aminu was the pick before Gordon Hayward. Just understand what that pick is. 1 through 5 picks change this league, but the 8th pick it's a nice player. It's an asset. It's a chit as much as anything. You're giving up a chit that's a pretty good trade piece on draft day. You might be able to parlay into something. That's the risk. So what makes it worth giving that up. I think you have to look at a bunch of different things. Okay, next year's pick is top 6. If the Warriors say limit protections to top 3 next year, so you have a chance to get 4, 5, or 6, is that worth it? What do you think of the Warriors' chances are next year? Talking to people around the league, everyone's best case is they're about 500. I mean, realize they were what, a few games below 500 before they started tanking last year. And so, but you look and teams that are probably going to be worse than the Warriors: New Orleans, New Jersey, depending what they do with Dwight and Darren, Washington, Toronto, Cleveland, Charlotte, probably Phoenix if they lose Nash. You don't really know what everybody else is doing, but just that's a safe look at this. If you look around the NBA, teams that are probably going to be less good than the Warriors. So even if the Warriors kind of hit the skids next year, Steph Curry's ankle goes, Andrew Bogut's ankle goes, not sure they're 4, 5, 6. Okay, but is that worth it? Is the 25% chance of getting the 8th pick, understanding what the 8th pick is that worth it? For the chance of 4, 5, or 6. The likelihood is the Warriors are about a 35, 36 win team. I might need to take this call. Hi, this is David. Hey, how are you doing, Sean? Can I call you back in about 10 minutes? All right, thanks. I'll call you right back. Bye. Sorry about that. I didn't want to stop the recording of the podcast, but I wanted to get I've got a bunch of calls out. If that was a news call, then I would have stopped the recording. But that was not a GM or a scout or a assistant GM or someone who I've got calls out to. Where was I? So if the Warriors, in all likelihood next year, 35, 30, then you're talking about 10, 11, 12 pick. And you get that pick. So what's worth giving up this year's 25% chance? I talked to somebody in the league who said if they gave us, the Warriors have the 30th pick of the draft, I would bypass the 30th pick, the 25% chance for the 30th pick this year because I'm still getting 10 or 11, 12 next year. Would you trade, right? But it's only for a 25% chance. Remember that. It's only a 25% chance. This is really an incredible discussion. The key here is you're trading something that you only have a 25% chance of getting, and you don't lose it. So you're bringing in some other value if you do a deal, and you still get the pick. Personally, for me, what I think would make it worth it is if the Warriors were to drop all protection. But I'm not sure they would do that. If the Warriors were, here's my thing. From the Jazz standpoint, the Jazz have no chance of getting a top 3 pick in an NBA draft again now that its favors develops and Hayward develops. There's just no chance. So, at least hopefully. So, therefore, if I'm the Jazz, that's the value. Now, I talked to somebody who said to me, okay, well, wait a second. If the Warriors are 12 or 13th in the league next year, in the draft position next year, you just gave up your 25% chance for a 2% chance or a 3% chance to get in the top 3. I'm like, okay, I'm fine with that, actually. That limited chance to win the lottery I'm willing to go get. Let me ask you this. What are the chances that the Warriors finish 4th, 5th, or 6th worst record in the NBA next year? What are those chances? I don't think they're very high. I think the chances of the Warriors are better than that. So is it willing to bypass the 25% chance of getting the 8th pick for a top, if they drop the protections to top 3? My analysis on that might be maybe not. Could you go get a player? You can't you'd have to trade a player for a player, by the way. You'd have to be what's called simultaneous deals. We'll agree to do this year, and by the way, we'll also do this deal, and they're really connected, but in regards to transactions, they'd be separate. You cannot trade for a restricted free agent. So therefore, the only players on the Warriors you could go acquire, you're not going to be able to get Bogut. You don't go get David Lee because his contract's crazy, and we already have You're not going to be able to go. You don't want Richard Jefferson. You don't want Andres Biedrins. So now Darrell Wright has 2 years left. Steph Curry's not available. Brandon Rush is not available because he's a restricted free agent. They won't trade Klay Thompson. So really, suddenly Darrell Wright or Charles Jenkins, maybe. I'm not sure. So really, Darrell Wright is the only player out there, and at $3.8 million, you'd have to trade a player on our roster who's somewhat near that, who's somewhere within 8 million, and that's, that becomes intuitively obvious on our roster of what you'd have to do in that regard. We don't have it'd have to be an Earl Watson or a Raja Bell, and I don't know how Jamal Tinsley works with a team option. I guess we could exercise the team option and then trade Jamal. So those are now, would the Warriors do that? Would you do that? Would you take Darrell Wright back as the only real player that you could take in exchange for bypassing the protection this year and the protections hold its top 6 next year? Your risk, the big risk the Jazz have, is that at some point here, the Warriors are in the top 5 worst teams in the NBA next year and the year after, and they get second-round picks. So maybe that's your real thing. Maybe that you're asking 2 years down the road that there's no protection, so you're guaranteed to get a first-round pick, and you eliminate your bad side risk on the backside. It's a really incredible discussion here. So and we're all over the map. Let me back up here. So one thing is you're giving away a 25% chance to get the 8th pick of the draft. 28, 25, whatever. Call it 25. It's easier to equate. The 8th pick, which is a good, solid rotation player. But you're not losing. You still have you still have the rights for the pick the next year or the year after. You're not giving up the pick. So what is that 25% worth? It could be worth reduced protections, but I think we've established that reduced protection pick 3, 4, or 4, 5, 6 seems unlikely to come to play. You might be better off taking the 25% chance this year. Now, they reduce all protections. Does that make it worth it? That's even less likely, but it gives you an opportunity to get something you'd never have before. Mention the player possibility. What about the 30th pick possibility? Then you run into the money issue. Okay? Now, something I thought, if they're willing to give you $3 million, reduce some of the protections, my initial thought, and I can turn around and possibly use that $3 million to get back in the draft somewhere, maybe that's worth it. The problem is you never know whether you can use that $3 million to get into the draft. The most you can pay for a draft pick is $3 million. Most you can trade at any point in cash is $3 million. Non-player salary. $3 million. Well, it's frankly, if you could go get $3 million for a quarter chance of a pick, that's a pretty unbelievable deal. Really, that's like the equivalent of getting $12 million. I mean, Phoenix took $3 million from Boston, and Boston took that pick into Rajon Rondo a few years ago. Now, I think those days may be done. But for 25%, if you can go get $3 million, that's a hell of a deal. We don't like that as fans because we don't want the organization to do things for money purposes, but that's a pretty good deal. Particularly if you take that $3 million and you go buy the 17th pick or the 22nd pick or the 24th pick. Hard to do, but in this year's draft, I think there's a feeling that there's some teams in there where you might be able to buy picks that you wouldn't be otherwise. The Rockets have both 14 and 16. They're likely to take it, but the Mavericks at 17 very well may not want to have any more cap space on. The Magic at 19 might not want more cap space. Boston at 21 and 22 may not want to have more cap space. Atlanta at 23 I think is likely to possibly move their pick. Memphis at 25 may not want that. So Indiana's may not want 26. There's a lot of chances to possibly get into the bottom end of this draft. All right, well, $3 million buys you in the later draft, get the pick next year. Or the year after. Is that worth it? It's an incredibly interesting discussion. I think the other wild card you have to put into this is the idea of tanking. You've seen the Warriors tank already. You know other teams are going to tank. If the Warriors drop their protection to 1 through 3, and so they know they're not going to be, and there's no way they can tank to 1 through 3. They're going to keep winning while other teams are losing, and that pick's just going to keep going up and up, and the chances of you getting 4, 5, and 6 go out the window. Right? What are you really getting? If you're Kevin O'Connor, you got to do this risk analysis. If they're pulling protection for 4, 5, and 6, what are you really getting? What are the chances of that ever coming to play? Are they 20%? Is a 20% chance of 4, 5, or 6 better than a 25% chance at 8 this year? Or right? It's a fascinating one to chew on. What does $3 million get you? Doesn't get you extra salary cap space. It doesn't get you extra luxury tax space. It does get you the possibility to use that money to buy a pick. But frankly, the Millers have shown at every point along the way that if there's a pick Kevin wants for $3 million, they'll probably buy it anyway. They've been shown a willingness to always to spend that money, and frankly, if you amortize that out over the 3 or 4 years of a rookie contract, that's a pretty good way to spend money. It's not as though Kevin has been restricted in his ability to go do that if he wants to get a pick. I think from all conversations I've ever had with everyone in the organization, there's always a willingness to go get that pick if they need it. So that's where we sit. We'll see what happens. It's tomorrow night, and this decision has to come down soon. So I'm going to hit stop and post this. And there's the analysis of what a 25 to 28% chance of getting the pick is worth and whether you make the deal. And you decide at this point what you would be willing to do, what protections you'd be willing to take. My take is if the Jazz can get something with no protection and they can eliminate the risk on the backside of ever ending up with just second-round picks and maybe also get the 30th, or I'm not in love with that, but something of that nature, I would be probably willing to bypass this 25% chance. I don't like the money thing either, but frankly, if you can get the money for 25%, that's in the equation of what an NBA value is, that's way on your side. I don't love it because I'm a fan also, but that's way on your side if you can go get money for it. So that would be my answer of whether you do this. My guess at this point is it's unlikely, but the wild card here is the emotions of the Warriors. They got a new owner. They have to justify the dollars of scouting and draft day excitement and all those kind of things. And the possibility that they would lose out on that may make them agree to some deals that wouldn't happen previously, or that they wouldn't agree to up to this point. See ya.